Walk through a mall today and something feels different. The lights are on, the stores are open, the music is playing. People are still walking around, but a lot of them are not really shopping. They're looking, comparing prices, holding bags from one store instead of three, skipping the food court, passing on the shoes, waiting on the jacket, putting the extra purchase off until next week. And that change matters, because when global pressure builds, it does not stay in oil fields, shipping lanes, or stock markets. It eventually shows up in ordinary places, like the gas station, like the grocery store, like the monthly power bill, and yes, like the mall. This is the part people miss. They think global crises are far away. They think wars, shipping disruptions, oil shocks, and market panic only matter to governments, investors, or big corporations. But that's not how it works. The world hits the consumer, and the consumer changes the economy. So in this video, we're going to break down how current global events move from headlines to household budgets to everyday spending, and why the mall may be one of the clearest warning signs that something bigger is happening. A lot of people hear mall and think the story is already over. They think online shopping killed it, case closed, nothing more to say. That's lazy analysis, because the mall is still useful as an economic signal. Why? Because it sits right in the middle of discretionary spending. The mall is where people go when they have enough breathing room to buy more than survival. Clothes, shoes, gifts, cosmetics, impulse food, entertainment, lifestyle spending. So when the consumer gets squeezed, the mall feels it fast. Not always all at once. Not always with boarded-up stores overnight, but in subtler ways first. Less foot traffic, more browsing, less buying, more discounting, more empty hands, more financing offers, more buy now, pay later, more hesitation. That matters because the mall is not just a retail space, it's a pressure gauge. To understand why spending changes, you have to understand where the pressure begins. Right now, the world is dealing with a dangerous mix of instability. The Iran war has driven oil above $100 a barrel, hit investor sentiment, and pushed businesses to pull back on investment because of higher raw material and energy costs. And this is not just about headlines. This matters because energy is upstream from almost everything. If oil rises sharply, shipping gets more expensive, trucking gets more expensive, air travel gets more expensive, manufacturing gets more expensive, packaging gets more expensive, food logistics get more expensive. Then those costs move downstream, and downstream is where the consumer lives. At the same time, markets are getting nervous. U.S. stock futures fell on March 23rd as the conflict raised inflation fears and made investors dial back expectations for interest rate cuts this year. That means people are not just dealing with higher prices, they're also dealing with uncertainty. And uncertainty changes spending behavior fast. This is where the story becomes real. A household doesn't think in terms of geopolitics. It thinks in terms of monthly math. Can we fill the tank? Can we cover groceries? Can we pay the power bill? Can we replace the tires? Can we still eat out this weekend? Can we buy the kids new clothes this month? Can we justify a trip to the mall if everything costs more? That is how a global crisis enters daily life. First comes fuel. If global oil jumps, households feel it at the pump. Reuters reported that fuel prices in the U.S. have surged nearly 30% during the current war-driven energy disruption, even with policy efforts to limit the damage. Then comes transport-heavy inflation. The cost of moving goods rises. Then comes grocery pressure, then utility pressure, then the pressure on everything that is not essential. And that is where mall spending starts getting cut. Because when people are forced to prioritize, they don't stop spending all at once. They cut layers. The extra shirt goes first, then the nicer shoes, then the second meal out, then the little impulse buys. Then the family shopping trip becomes just one specific errand. That's how retail weakens. Not from a dramatic collapse at first, from thousands of small acts of caution. The mall lives on optional spending. That's the point. If someone is under pressure, they still need groceries. They still need gas. They still need rent money. They still need utilities. But they do not need a second pair of sneakers, a new watch, a better jacket when the old one still works, a food court meal plus coffee plus dessert, a casual shopping trip with no plan. And when enough people start making those choices, the mall changes. You start seeing more promotions, more clearance signs, more doorbuster energy, more stores trying to manufacture urgency because organic demand is softening. You also see consumer psychology shift. Even people with money become more defensive when the mood changes. If headlines scream war, oil shock, inflation, and market instability, people don't spend the same way. They pull inward. They wait. They rationalize. They delay. That emotional shift matters as much as the raw numbers, because the consumer does not need to be broke to stop spending freely. They only need to feel less safe. This is why current events matter, even if someone never studies global economics. The Iran conflict is not just an oil market story. It is already spilling into equities, business planning, and inflation expectations. Reuters reported on March 23 that U.S. stock futures fell as the conflict dimmed rate cut hopes, while Siemens said customers are already holding back on investments because higher energy and raw material prices are hurting confidence. That mood spreads. Businesses become cautious. Then hiring slows. Investment slows, expansion slows, consumers pick up on it, the media amplifies it, markets reinforce it, and soon people shop like they're entering a storm, not because everything has already collapsed, but because they can feel the pressure building. That's when places like the mall stop being casual lifestyle environments and start becoming diagnostic tools. You can almost read the economic mood in the way people move through them. More looking, less carrying, more sale racks, more just getting one thing. This is the chain most people never see clearly. Let's walk it through. A geopolitical crisis disrupts energy. Oil prices rise. Shipping and transport costs rise. Importers pay more. Producers pay more. Retailers pay more. Households pay more. Then the household cuts back. Then discretionary retail weakens. Then malls feel emptier, even if they are not actually empty. That distinction matters. Because the mall can still be full of bodies and weak in spending. People can go just to walk, just to browse, just to get out of the house, just to compare prices before buying online later, just to let the kids move around. But that does not save retailers if checkout volume weakens. And if the pressure lasts long enough, it changes store economics. Margins get thinner, inventory gets riskier, promotions get deeper, locations become harder to justify. That is when a global event starts changing local commercial real estate. This may be the biggest shift of all. The modern consumer has been trained for years to keep spending through stress. Credit cards, installment payments, buy now, pay later, promotional financing, rewards points, treat yourself culture. But global pressure can overwhelm that mindset because eventually the consumer notices gas is up, food is up, bills are up, markets feel shaky, borrowing is still expensive, the future feels less certain. Then discipline returns, not because people suddenly become financially wise, but because pressure leaves them no choice. And when that happens, the mall becomes one of the first places where restraint becomes visible. That is why the mall matters in this story. It is where emotion meets economics. Now let's zoom out. The mall is not the whole story. It is the symptom. The real story is that world events are pushing households into a more defensive posture. That has wider consequences. Retail slows, restaurants soften, travel weakens, big purchases get delayed. Local businesses feel it, commercial landlords feel it, cities feel it. And the economy starts losing momentum in the places that rely on confidence. Confidence is everything in discretionary spending. When confidence goes, the first thing to disappear is not survival spending. It is freedom spending. That is what the mall represents, freedom spending. And when the mall gets quieter, not just in foot traffic, but in actual transactions, that tells you something deeper is happening. Here's the important part. This does not automatically mean the mall dies. It may mean the mall changes. The strongest malls may survive by becoming less about pure shopping and more about mixed-use experience. Dining, entertainment, events, services, family destinations, luxury concentration, convenience hybrids. In other words, the mall may stop being just a retail machine and become a social commercial environment. But weaker malls, especially those dependent on broad middle-class discretionary spending, are more exposed. Because if the middle gets squeezed, the middle market mall gets squeezed too. That is the brutal truth. And global instability makes that squeeze worse. If you want to understand where this goes, watch a few things. Watch oil, because oil is upstream from the rest. Watch markets, because market stress changes confidence. Watch inflation expectations, because if people think prices will keep rising, they spend differently. Watch discounting, because when retailers get aggressive, they are telling you demand is softer than they want. And watch the mall itself, not just whether it is open, not just whether people are there. Watch the bags, watch the food court lines, watch the empty storefronts, watch the sale signs, watch the energy. Because sometimes the clearest economic signals are not in an economist's chart. They are in a place people have walked through their whole lives. So yes, global crises can feel distant. Wars happen overseas. Shipping disruptions happen on maps. Oil shocks begin in places most people will never see. But they do not stay there. They move through fuel, through freight, through prices, through fear, through financial markets, through business decisions, through household budgets, and eventually they show up in ordinary American life. At the gas station, at the checkout line, at the dinner table, and at the mall. That's why the mall still matters. Not because it tells the whole story, but because it reveals when the consumer is no longer spending with confidence. And when that changes, everything downstream changes with it. This is Wide Wonder, exploring the forces shaping the future of our world. and the places where that future becomes visible.